Hi, if you are joining us and have not seen the last 13 minutes of this video, I do recommend to do so now to get the conclusions and tips. If you are watching part 1 and now part 2 because you'd like to know my whole story and my recommendations, here we go. A valid question is, what did I do to counteract all this jittery, anxious, extra energy side effects of lysine when I was taking 3,000 milligrams per day? Remember, at this point, I am suppressing the virus below symptomatic threshold. Zero suffering from the virus, but suffering the side effects of lysine. When I wasn't taking antibiotics, I drank a small beer or a small rum and Coke. This is not what I am recommending to you, and you may find another method to relieve these side effects. This really did dampen the jittery feeling for me. A funny or annoying side effect of lysine, if you take it too close to bed, dreams. Dreams like you cannot believe. After you fought to go to sleep due to the excess energy, then the dreams may keep your mind so active that you may wake up exhausted. Happened twice in my life using lysine. If you're experiencing exactly the same thing I am reporting, let us know in the comments. If you're having any other side effects with lysine, please write down what meds you are taking, what foods you ate, drinks you had. For example, those 2 or 3x high caffeine sodas will make you symptomatic with the virus. Try not to confuse caffeine withdrawal, coronavirus symptoms, and lysine side effects. Let's turn to the success stories. At the time of this writing, 27 affected successful suppression of symptoms. 0 hospitalizations, 0 people needing supplemental oxygen post-lysine exposure. About 2 weeks before my first symptom, I gave all my good friends 10 pills each in sandwich bags. Told them these simple instructions: if anyone is infected, give them these pills. 1 hour before a meal, 2 cups of water, and voila. My good friend's father-in-law hospitalized, tested positive, 6 days of fever and other symptoms, 4 days in the hospital. Not improving at all, no end in sight. This man is heavy, diabetic, and a few other comorbidities. His daughter prepared a meal, hid the pills in the food bag, and in this country you can pass the nurse your food and the patient will receive it. In the evening, takes his first pill, he reports trouble falling asleep. But once he did, it was the best sleep he had in a long time. Wakes up feeling surprisingly well. Takes another 1,000 milligram L-lysine pill. Waits an hour for breakfast. Doctors come in and do a once-over. 0 fever. Almost no symptoms. They take a chest x-ray or whatever method they used, and lungs show huge improvement. The doctors say to him that day, 14 hours after first pill, 2 pills in total. Keep it up. We will send you home tomorrow. At this time is when I'm informed by the daughter of the situation of her father, what she did, and she told me what the doctor said to his father. 6 p.m. the same day, the daughter sends me a voice note saying that he feels completely cured, like a miracle, and that he started doing research and saw that in 2016 there was a study on lysine and coronavirus. This is the same study that I knew about even before catching the virus. And this was the study that assured me that this was an Arginine-dependent virus. Understand, this is how fast this works. I assume when he finally fell asleep is when the fever abated and allowed him to get a restful night's sleep. He later wrote a testimonial to this pill, and I showed several doctors, and the one doctor I donated a bottle of lysine to, she used it with great success. She did not give me the specifics as she's a combative, non-chatty woman, but if she followed my advice, I gave her a bottle of 180 pills, and I told her to give 10 pills to each person. At the time of the writing, they are on day 3 or day 4. So potentially 180 pills divided by 10 equals 18 more successes. That is not included in my 27 that I personally had a hand in. Most of the 27 were fine within 24 hours, or just mild, comfortable symptoms, leaving me with the coffee troublemakers, whose recovery was longer and troublesome. Oh, as an added pleasant success story, one of my friends that I gave pills to, a neighbor asked him if this will work on varicella zoster. Quick search, finding that it's a herpes family virus. I said, yes, it will. Greatly helped with the pain and speedy recovery was the report I got back. Bonus, found a proper treatment for 2 viruses in 1 month, potentially a third. Waiting for antibody results for dengue. Doctors, when you give your febrile patient Lysine, measure their fever before dose and 2 and 4 hours later. I can honestly forgive you for believing that this is an antipyretic. Doctor, this is not dulling the senses, masking symptoms, or alleviating pain. This is going straight to the core of the problem. This is ripping the roots out of the virus and letting it rot, calming the immune system response, dousing the fire of the cytokine storm. Imagine a bully throwing a punch at you. During his swing, you duck and trip, and the bully, he falls on his face. You jump on his back and beat that bully virus down. Lysine is the duck and tripping action done to the virus, allowing the immune system to play catch up without overreacting and create the cytokine storm. No need to stress the body and damage healthy cells. No, sir. I tripped up the virus. Now, Mr. Immune System, you can take your sweet time building up the antibodies without a fuss. Another way to visualize this is a mountain. A virus load mountain. Starts small but soon exponentially grows and passes the symptomatic threshold. Symptoms causing the brain to register that something is wrong. This mountain is now soaring to a viral peak, or maybe rounded, maybe sharp, may take days, may take a week. I do not know. The backside of the virus mountain may be a gradual descent or a sharper decline, depending on the strength of the immune system. Imagine this same mountain, but you cut it shortly after symptoms begin, and you knock the mountain down below the symptomatic threshold. Instead of suffering weeks or months even, as some people are, you suffer hours, a few days at most. My total suffering time was under 20 hours, spread between 3 or 4 days. I theorize that a viral peak in untreated patients possibly coincides with an Arginine trough. It may not be perfect correlation, as you need to take into account for immune system response, but this would be an interesting study. This is most likely why people who find some mediocre results with fasting, they may not know why, but they are waiting for the body to consume all the Arginine and starve the virus, hence feeling better eventually. This is a slow and suffering way. Go Lysine-rich diet or take Lysine pills, results within hours. When symptoms gently return, take more Lysine. I wish I had access to patients' Arginine levels and viral load levels to confirm this. I suspect this, but I am confident that this is correct. Would be an interesting study? Absolutely sure to fine-tune and dial in all this information. For those of you recovering but still suffering some lasting symptoms, don't despair. The 2 of the 3 infected I helped post-peak of the virus mountain, once they took 2 Lysine in one day and 1 the next day, they did not need Lysine after that. I did mention that if they felt the smallest symptoms, take half a pill. This can be reproduced without the pill by adding margarine, cheese, yogurt, and papaya to your diet. No need to wait for Lysine to be delivered in the mail. The third person, my longest and most difficult person to help. This woman did not listen to me on day 1 and was not getting better. Day 2, once I got the info that she did not quit the 2 cups of coffee and 2 cups of high caffeine tea, she stopped immediately and started suffering caffeine withdrawals. And to top it all off, the symptoms of the coronavirus simultaneously. Might I suggest you do not do this and quit coffee before getting infected. Within 2 days, she was feeling much better, so much so, after 50 days of symptoms, she wanted to go running on day 4 after first Lysine exposure. I was very proud. I am certain it was her 2 cups of coffee was the reason why she was suffering so long. In essence, she was unknowingly sabotaging her own recovery. If only Dr. Fauci and the World Health Organization could give such wonderful advice, could ease the suffering of countless people and many thousands of deaths. If you're watching, please advise cheese, yogurt, papaya, lysine-rich diets, and no coffee or high caffeine drinks or food high in arginine. I know this may sound arrogant, but the one person I was helping, I actually made a prediction on what time that person was going to be almost perfectly fine. The pill was taken in the late evening, and he was going to take another at 6 a.m. or so. I predicted after the first pill, he would be near perfectly fine by 3 p.m. the next day. I admit, I was wrong. I was too pessimistic. The reality was, he was nearly perfect by 9 a.m., a full 6 hours faster than I predicted. I wanted to share this one idea. Things that I knew that worked in the past for flu and many other viruses should give you hope that if you had a pre-flu or flu-cold regimen, that it might possibly work for you with the coronavirus. But I do suggest you have a tub of margarine, cheese, and yogurt in your fridge just in case. I want to touch on one interesting subject. There is this doctor in the Dominican Republic that is using an antiparasitic called ivermectin, which was found to be effective in a lab setting in Australia. He's saying within 2 days, people are much better. Good results. Unfortunately, he did not mention the dose and duration. Since I live in a free country, I decided to pick up and give it a try. I had experimented with 2 pills, 6 grams each. Unfortunately, all I can find. I waited for 2 days after the last dose to stop taking lysine to see if it had any effect. Unfortunately, I had to return to taking lysine as symptoms showed up. I cannot speak if it was effective or not, or maybe lysine prevented it from finding enough virus particles to work. I just don't know. I would like to have done more experimentation if I had more pills available, but, hey, I needed to do an antiparasitic treatment, and luckily I was due. This doctor is touting it as a cure. Hear me out for the next 2 minutes. They may sound a little bit confusing. Let me tell you in one way, I am against curing the virus. If you cure someone too early in the virus, the body may not produce a sufficient load of antibodies and be immune from catching the virus again. Say if you are cured from the virus and no antibodies, 2 months later you get reinfected, but the supply chain disruptions, demand, or war has stripped the availability of the cure from the pharmacies. Up the creek without a paddle. Yes, by all means, those who are critical, fragile, whatever other complications, cure them. That is without a doubt. Theoretically, if there was a cure, and nearly no one would get antibodies, so we would never get herd immunity. At least this can buy us some time for them to produce a vaccine. Vaccine is a topic that I won't touch, but would you line up for a vaccine that has been rushed into service without proper vetting and a long-established health history that you can trust? Myself, if I have the antibodies and my knowledge, I would not get a rushed vaccine. I'm sorry. I'm not anti-vaccine, but I'm not for it in many cases. My preference or vision with lysine and this virus is in part put 20 pills of 500 milligrams of lysine in every household. Give them an approved list of foods for the infected. And make sure that the people understand how to dose properly. Open up the economy and let's everyone get infected, get herd immunity as soon as possible, with minimal suffering and least fatalities. Just recently, they authorized emergency use of remdesivir, $1,000 per dose, I hear. Marginal time reduction and performance, reducing hospital time by 2 or 3 days from 14. Are you kidding me? Buy $1,000 of lysine, and I will treat the entire hospital and reduce the hospital stay down to 2 or 3 days in total for 80% of the patients to continue treatment at home. Once again, I feel I am being pessimistic. In reality, it would probably be 1 to 2 days and over 90%. Yes, that is a bold statement, and you can quote me on the 80% stats anyway. Doctors, spend $12. Prove me wrong. Don't sabotage it by feeding them coffee, nuts, or other arginine-rich foods or supplements. Treat the patients for caffeine withdrawals, and go save some lives. Well, now that I threw down the gauntlet to the scientific and medical community, let's see what I would do differently if I can go through this infection and experimentation again. I'd like to have experimented with elderberry gummies prior to being symptomatic to see if it would have prevented me from getting infected. This is important for those who are infected. And using elderberry, if you are not seeing an improvement, I suggest you stop taking it as it is high in arginine. And I have heard a few doctors say it may provoke a cytokine storm. I can definitely see a correlation with that, as arginine will displace the lysine that is keeping the cytokine storm in check. Lysine slows the storm, arginine fuels it. Quercitin, like elderberry, I learned of these two post-infection. I have some positive data on both. I would like to have experimented with this. I'm assisting a good friend in Ashus in Pakistan. He has had a lot of knowledge and some experience on quercetin. And we together have helped 3 people jointly with lysine and quercetin and other supplements. Although I am having the smallest suspicion that quercetin is actually slowing the lysine response compared to people using lysine alone. All have been positive results, and would like to take this time and thank Ashus for showing me some valuable data and experience. Out of the 27 people that I have reported successes and the 3 difficulties due to coffee, I was the only person who needed to go over 3,000 milligrams. And I unfortunately was the longest duration in total time taking lysine. Either because my immune system is so weak, or because the moment I had my first symptoms, I added 1,000 milligrams to my prophylaxis. This action may have caused a stifling effect on the immune system response, may have made my body to be lysine dependent longer. Contrary thought, if I had let a fever happen for a day or 2, I may have been lysine free shortly. If I was going to do it all over again, I would have used 2,000 milligrams as a daily prophylaxis, or I would have used no lysine and maybe suffered 1 or 2 days of fever to stimulate the immune system response. This would be an interesting medical study as well. I have a sneaky suspicion that lysine worked too well, and it did not allow the immune system to identify the threat and build up its defenses in a more timely manner. Mind you, I only suffered for less than 20 hours spread over several days. I did have to live with the lysine side effects of way too much energy and anxious feeling, which was most prevalent at 3,000 milligrams or over. If I was doing it over, I would have taken 1,000 milligrams twice a day, early morning, early afternoon, and wait until symptoms showed, only using 500 milligram increments and wait an hour. I do not recommend going over 3,000 milligrams per day, but only in an emergency, like when your wife accidentally poisons you with coffee. It seems that 500 milligrams is usually good enough for 4 to 6 hours at minimum of symptom relief, depending on viral load and immune system strength. Of course, these times are after you have become completely asymptomatic and lysine dependent to keep the symptoms down. I also wish I had an oxygenator and pulse measuring device. I would like to have checked my oxygen saturation when I had the lung pain and shortness of breath, and especially the coffee incident, and measure how quickly lysine would have made a difference. I would like to have taken my temperature much more often than once a day. I should have taken temperature when becoming symptomatic. I only took my temperature at 5 p.m. for 5 days until I broke the thermometer. My luck. Thankfully, I was over the hump when the thermometer broke. I also would like to have had pH strips and see if I can get a variation in pH and see if there's a corresponding effect on the symptoms. I guess it is time to summarize my findings down to the do's and don'ts, but it's going to be a long list. Scientists, pay attention. In my experiments to confirm my suspicion, time and time again, without fail, this virus is arginine dependent for replication and survival. Avoid arginine-rich foods and supplements. I suspect majority of the unusual cases of triathletes and bodybuilders, people in general perfect health, were taking arginine supplements when they got infected, therefore hospitalizing them. I understand some male enhancement supplements also have arginine in them. According to various sources, foods high in arginine to avoid are nuts, seeds, grains, chocolate, grape juice, peanut butter, grapes, berries, elderberries, tahini, rice, shredded wheat, cucumber, corn, grits, orange, tomato, plantains, and many more. All these foods are high in arginine, and in fact, you are inadvertently feeding the virus that is hurting you. Numerous times in my experiments, I could provoke symptoms using 4 to 6 ounces of nuts. I'd become symptomatic, and then I would smack the symptoms back down with the methods I will explain in part 3. Number 2, probably the second most important thing that you can do to relieve your suffering and heal faster. Quit coffee. Quit coffee, high caffeine teas, high caffeine energy drinks. Coffee itself is a double-edged sword. It is listed on the 20 highest arginine drinks list. Please find that list on the internet and avoid those drinks best you can. Caffeine has an inhibitory effect on arginine consumption, forcing the arginine to travel through metabolic pathways, and I theorize, right into the virus's loving arms. Coffee is a symptom multiplier, and from asymptomatic with no pills for a day or two, you can easily coax the virus symptoms back to life with coffee. I did numerous experiments toying with this virus, and I can tell you without a doubt, unequivocally, coffee is the 2020 most deadliest drink. You can quote me on it. I promise you it is true. During this virus, I did drink sodas, which is about 1/3 the caffeine of a coffee. So if you're suffering caffeine withdrawals, wait as long as you can before drinking a soda to relieve your caffeine suffering. Faster you get away from caffeine and coffee, the faster you will heal with the following methods. You don't want to suffer coronavirus symptoms and caffeine withdrawals. That, I imagine, would really be difficult. The most important discovery by far is arginine's enemy, lysine. Without a doubt, arginine, coffee, caffeine are an infected person's enemy. Lysine is the most definitely your best friend in this fight, and my undisputed number 1 tip. Once I knew that the family of coronaviruses was arginine dependent for viral replication in the 2016 MERS coronavirus study, this was about 1.5 months before I was infected. I was nearly certain that L-lysine would come to the rescue. Lysine is arginine's adversary. They compete for space in metabolic pathways. Put too much lysine in, arginine no longer available to feed the virus. Lysine-rich foods are most likely in your refrigerator. You can get plenty of lysine in yogurt, margarine, various cheeses, papaya, beets, cream cheese, butter, sherbet, milk, ice cream, fish, and many other foods. Nearly all meats are more lysine-rich, but the ratio of lysine to arginine is not high. If you are completely controlling symptoms with lysine-rich foods, you can eat it, but keep the amounts lower and concentrate on the higher ratio lysine foods. Please look up herpes diet or foods high in lysine and to low in arginine ratio. Please follow these food recommendations. If you are lazy like me, just get 1,000 milligram lysine supplements. Lysine has been studied for herpes and cold sores, but I can almost bet you these studies that were mediocre results were due to participants unwittingly sabotaging the experiment by drinking coffee. They should rerun all these studies, making sure that none of the participants are coffee drinkers, and I bet you they will find 100% correlation. Coffee, together with the arginine effect, is too strong for lysine to counteract quickly. It took me 2 to 3 hours to calm the cytokine storm using every dirty trick in my virus handbook. And lysine, of course. That was the scariest night. My follow-up experiment, 30 hours after last symptom and no lysine, I purposely brought back the symptoms using coffee. Symptoms returned so quickly and with such a strength, and even added new pains in my lungs that I never had previously. That took 1,000 milligrams at the 1.5-hour post cup of coffee. It stopped everything from getting worse in a half hour, but it took another 1,000 milligrams and 20 minutes after that to start bringing the symptoms down again. Approximately 45 minutes after the second lysine, I was fine. Lots of energy, but fine. 27 people that I had helped directly or indirectly with lysine and myself are a testament to its efficacy. 100% efficacy once people stopped the coffee and arginine-rich foods. Once I saw that lysine was completely in control of the virus and symptom suppression, I stopped taking all other supplements about day 8 or 9. In reality, it was an unfair fight for the coronavirus. I had over a decade of experience using lysine for various viruses, including pink eye, colds, flu, chikungunya, and dengue. In fact, when lysine did not work, I knew it was time for antibiotics. That almost always stopped the cough. Lysine does not work on bacteria, mold, etc. In fact, I am so confident and believe lysine will work on Ebola due to its requirement of arginine for viral stability. Unfortunately, I saw one study that's very interesting to me where lysine works in reverse, and that was on HIV. Since that family is called retroviruses, I jokingly theorized that arginine might work. I have not dug into it, just a tiny little theory. Believe it or not, most viruses are arginine dependent. Please understand that. As long as a virus doesn't mutate and not needing arginine for replication, then lysine will most likely work. For that mutation to happen, it's about the equivalent of a human mutating to breathing water. It is very unlikely. I can't see that happening. While the biology and method of spreading the virus is interesting with ACE2 receptors and angiotensin 1,7, once you have lysine, well, fascinating stuff that it is, it has no importance. It has no bearing. My fastest response time for a person who could not walk 4 steps from bed to feeling noticeably better was a half an hour. That is how fast this works. That person was walking without losing his breath in less than 12 hours. Number 4, vitamin D. While I did not notice any direct effects, there are so many studies, autopsies pointing to poor outcomes, deaths for those who have extremely low vitamin D. People of color, please spread this message around. The darker the skin color, the poorer the vitamin D production is in your body from the sun. Please, people should get their vitamin D levels checked and supplement properly. If you're a person who has dark skin or a cave dweller, someone who never leaves the house, it is statistically shocking the deaths in the black community due to lack of vitamin D. While there may be numerous reasons, including arginine-rich diet, comorbidities, social problems, public transportation exposure, you should not discount the importance of vitamin D. 4% of deaths were people who had proper vitamin D levels, while 99% of deaths were deficient. Recent study in England showed you were 4 times more likely to die from coronavirus than whites. Sorry, I do not have the link for that. Italy, while having the second oldest demographic, 13th largest coffee drinkers in the world, adding to their problems, I read, has one of the lowest vitamin D levels in Europe. Add to the fact that the virus hit them in winter, it was a recipe for disaster. Look at Australia, who almost beat this virus at the time of making this video. Granted, when the virus arrived in Australia, it was summer. Pay attention, it is one of the countries that have the most vitamin D. Vitamin D is free for lighter skinned people. Just go and sit outside in the sun for 15 minutes per day, and you probably will get enough. Don't get a sunburn. Dark skinned people should probably use supplements. While I have the utmost faith in lysine, best not to put all your eggs in one basket. Check with your doctor. If you're going to get your blood analyzed for vitamin D, it wouldn't be a bad time to get the D-dimer levels checked, von Willebrand factor checked as well for a baseline in case you get sick, or maybe you may need a thinner. This virus is now being viewed not as a pulmonary problem, but a blood clotting problem. Lungs are probably the most fragile organ to blood clots, therefore swelling, causing shortness of breath, and lack of oxygen exchange. If your doctor gives you a blood thinner, ask him to review lysine and blood thinner reactions, and maybe you can use a lower dose of blood thinner. I felt 2 clots in the 2nd or 3rd week of the virus before the world was talking about this being a clotting disease. It makes sense to me. This was a traveling pain in my leg, and admittedly, I get one of those per year on average. No, I am not a healthy guy. Coincidence? Deep vein thrombosis? I really don't know. Number 5, sleep. Sleep also helps with symptom suppression. Most coronavirus survivors report evenings are bad, and I can attest to that. The only time I had troubles was in the evenings, on the days I was learning how to dose with lysine. Let me explain what my capabilities are with this virus. I can summon and dismiss symptoms within an hour once a person was asymptomatic. I can get a person to test negative using a throat swab PCR test twice and return them to being symptomatic within 2 days and test positive for a PCR test. A person who had 0 symptoms for a week, I can wake the beast up again and send them to the hospital. I can take a person who was never going to become symptomatic, who didn't have symptoms for 3 to 5 weeks after initial confirmed exposure, and I can bring up this virus and make them symptomatic. This has happened to my wife yesterday, all because of an extremely strong cup of coffee. This is important to a family who's sharing a home with an infected in isolation, not to tempt fate. I can manipulate this virus to my will. I promise you, I am guiding you in the right direction. And if you are willing to spend $20 to $40 at the supermarket or pharmacy, I want to make you better within hours or a day. Okay, let's get to the most important part of the video. And I apologize, I will have to repeat some things for the people who came to the video just for the conclusions and tips. Conclusion number 1. The thing I want you to take from this is to change your mentality from being afraid of the coronavirus and start looking at Arginine, coffee, and caffeine as your enemy. Conclusion 2. To starve the virus of Arginine below the threshold of being symptomatic, use lysine supplements or use a lysine-rich diet while you are waiting for supplements. My most efficient dose regimen is 1,000 milligrams with 2 cups of water, preferably 1 hour before or more before a meal. Take 1 more in the afternoon or early evening if you are feeling symptoms. If you feel symptoms in late evening, take half a pill, 500 milligrams. This will help you find your proper dosage. Yes, almost all manufacturers say that you should take L-lysine on an empty stomach. Do not drink coffee while taking lysine or while infected with any virus for that matter. I found that 1,000 milligrams at my viral peak was enough for 7 to 8 hours of symptom suppression. Later, when the viral load was dropping, 1,000 milligrams was good enough for 12 to 14 hours. Everyone's body is different, and timing and dose can be depending on if you were eating a lysine-rich diet or how strong your immune system is. Since I am an asthmatic and I was experiencing lung problems and lung pains, I did use L-lysine plus azithromycin for 4 days, starting on the 2nd evening of my noticeable lung pain. It was a precaution against a secondary bacterial infection. Your body will let you know when you need a dose by becoming slightly symptomatic. Once you have become asymptomatic for a day or so, pay attention to the slightest indications of symptoms returning. Remember, above 2,000 milligrams, dose in 500 milligram increments. Once you have your dose that is keeping you happy, all of the 27 successes I have had with other people, they were only using 2,000 milligrams or less. I do not recommend taking the 500 milligrams within an hour of bed, but if you are suffering severely, go ahead. It may be difficult to fall asleep, and Probably when you finally do, you will have a night full of dreams. Many people get a boost of energy with lysine, and I experienced 1,000 milligrams equal sensation to a cup of coffee with a mild anxious feeling in my chest. When I had to take 3,000 milligrams or more, it was too much energy. The tips. Stop drinking coffee, as this is a viral load and symptom multiplier. I am not a coffee drinker, and my wife accidentally almost killed me. Within 2 hours, 0 symptoms too, I was ready to go to the hospital, and I was about to make funeral home reservation. Yes, deadly serious, no joke. Coffee is 2020 most lethal drink. Of the 27 people I helped, only the 3 coffee and high caffeine tea drinkers were the most problematic to show significant progress in less than 3 days. Everyone else was 12 to 24 hours. Huge difference. Also, with one of my coffee drinkers, a 3-cup-a-day guy, I am certain if he was not a coffee drinker, he would have stayed asymptomatic. He only had anosmia, and it took Lysine 2.5 days to return his sense of smell and taste. If you leave the hospital, have tested negative twice, and you are feeling good and you want to go back to your old routine, don't drink coffee. This virus stays with you for a long time after you test negative. This will reinvigorate the virus hiding deep in your organs, spool it up to full-blown symptoms again, including possible hospitalization. It appears you became reinfected, and this is baffling the scientific and medical community. I promise you, I am right. Pick a low caffeine or no caffeine tea for the time being, or if you are suffering severe caffeine withdrawals, go ahead and drink a Coke or some similar soda. In one of my experiments, more than 7 days after no pills and no symptoms, a strong cup of coffee brought me a sore throat in less than 3 hours. This same cup of coffee, my wife, who was completely asymptomatic the entire duration of my infection, and a week after my symptoms have ceased, she became symptomatic with that cup, proving without a doubt coffee is the world's answer to the question if people are getting reinfected. The answer is no, just reactivation of the virus. In my case, my wife's case, actual asymptomatic for weeks or months became symptomatic with that incredibly strong cup of coffee. We never isolated from each other. She is healthy like an ox, only slightly high on cholesterol. My fault, by the way. After your last symptoms disappear, I suggest you wait 3 weeks at a minimum before you drink coffee. If you do become symptomatic hours to a day after starting coffee, you know you have sabotaged your own recovery. Squash the virus using the method I speak about in number 4 and extend the period without drinking coffee for another week on top of the 3 previous. If you have someone in the household in isolation, I highly suggest that no one in the household drinks coffee. If you catch the virus, you probably will have a higher chance of remaining asymptomatic. Oh, and as a tip for the houses that have someone in isolation, if you have traditional winds like in the Caribbean, for example, east to west, put the infected person on the west side of the house. If he is on the windward side of the house, higher probability of virus particles transiting through the entire house. Number 2, Arginine. Arginine, this virus is 100% dependent on this to reproduce. Check all your supplements that they do not have this. Arginine-rich foods and drink are to be avoided. Anything that has a high ratio of arginine to lysine. If a medication has arginine, consult your doctor and see if you can skip that medication for a few weeks while you are infected. Coffee has arginine. 3, sleep. I did notice that in the mornings I never had symptoms. I experimented once when having a small amount of symptoms. I took an hour-long nap in the late afternoon and symptoms were cut in half. I did use 10 milligrams of melatonin many nights, and I believe that it helped, but not 100% sure, like I am with coffee and next topic in number 4. Number 4, the undisputed champion and my most important tip is lysine. This is the hero of 2020, the most important supplement I can recommend. You can get supplements or just get lysine through your food. If you're a person who is symptomatic, suffering, or if you're a doctor treating the infected and you do not believe me, go to the fridge or supermarket, buy these 4 things: margarine, cheese, yogurt, papaya. Make 2 cheese sandwiches with margarine, lots of cheese, and have a little bit of papaya or non-berry yogurt for dessert. If you were one of the smart ones in the beginning of the part 1 video who took my advice and made 2 cheese sandwiches and sat through both videos, you probably feel noticeably better. I promise you have this meal twice, breakfast, lunch, or lunch and dinner, within 8 to 10 hours, or 1,000 milligrams with 2 cups of water, 1 hour before a meal, you will notice a big difference. No, I am not a hypnotist. This is not a placebo effect. This is measurable. Take your or the patient's temperature before the meal or pill. Check in on them in an hour. See if they are feeling better. By hour 2 to 4, you will see a drop in the fever. I have proven this with over a dozen experiments, making myself symptomatic, using Arginine foods, then smashing the symptoms down with lysine-rich foods or pills. Yes, I toyed with this virus to make it a valuable learning experience. I do recommend to healthcare professionals exposed to the virus take 1,000 milligrams twice a day as a prophylaxis to remain asymptomatic, and for goodness sake, stop drinking coffee and rolling out the red carpet for the virus. I was taking 1,000 milligrams and I did catch the virus and became symptomatic. 1 gram is not enough. Doubt me. Prove me wrong. Spend $12 on a bottle and spread the lysine around to the infected. I hope you get so emotional that you cry. People who are deteriorating and probably needing intubation, and in 1 day you can save them. Older folks with heart conditions, I would give them 250 milligrams to 500 milligrams every 4 to 8 hours, not to scare them into a panic, due to the energy that they will have, that they probably have not experienced in decades. That slight, tight pectoral muscle feeling may be mistaken for a heart attack. Therefore, no need to scare them into a heart attack. For everyone else, take 500 milligrams to 1,000 milligrams and wait for symptoms to return. If it is early in the afternoon, then take another 500 milligrams to 1,000 milligrams and time it. If you get symptoms late evening, use only 500 milligrams. Remember, 2 cups of water and wait 1 hour before having a meal. If this video goes viral, I would like supermarkets to implement this. They could quickly do a color coding system for foods for the infected. Gold star for the highest lysine to arginine ratio, green for the very good ratio, yellow for the slightly lysine or neutral foods, and red for arginine-rich foods. Skull and crossbones and red tape across the shelves for coffee. Warning how dangerous this is. Of course, make it available for those who are not infected, but the infected and their families need to know this. I have no stocks in any lysine companies. I'm not shorting coffee stocks. I would not gamble in this rigged market anyways, even if I had the means. I'm just reporting absolutely solid observations through my numerous discoveries, including but not limited to this virus is arginine dependent, lysine can control this virus, and lysine caused the cytokine storm of during the coronavirus. I have many more, but these were the most important. Please share this with the world. You may want to download this, as I suspect YouTube will pull this video down. If so, I will try to go to all other streaming YouTube competitors and put it there with the same title. Feel free to replicate this, repost this on your YouTube or whatever. You can edit as long as you do not take the words out of context. I am not a medical professional. Do not take this as medical advice, but prove me wrong, and you will be ever so pleasantly surprised you can't. I would love for the world to de-escalate these tensions, stop the suffering, minimize fatalities, and let the world get back on its feet and go to work again. Leave comments and success stories down below on the second video. If you have questions, you can ask them. I will review the comment section once daily for 2 weeks and try to answer them the best I can. This is Bob Karlicki. I wish you well. I know once you follow my tips, you will have a speedy recovery.